Hi, it's Webform for Designers. My name is Jake Rockowitz. I'm known as Jay Rockowitz on the web. I'm a Drupal developer and software architect. I built and maintain the Webform module for Drupal 8. And I'm just going to start with some Webform basics and just kind of define what the Webform module is. The Webform module is a powerful and flexible open source form builder and submission manager for Drupal 8. And I like to break the use case down into these kind of 6 steps, which is you build a form or copy a template, you publish that form on your site as a page note or block, you would then collect submissions, and when those submissions come in, you'd send out confirmations and notifications and emails. You'd review those results online, and then you distribute those results by either downloading a CSV or remote posting them to a third-party server. And it's as simple as build, collect, and distribute. And I'd like to just give a quick demo walking through all these steps in the Webform module. I hope people have used it, but this is a clean install. My demo always starts with just, here's a contact form. People are kind of familiar with it. And I'm going to add a company element to it. So you can go to the Add Element dialog and select the text field. So I'm building a form right now. I'm going to say company. I'm going to add it in. And then you can go over to the View tab and view the company element, which is added. There's a mistake here where it should say your company should be required and moved up. And this just gives us an opportunity to, you can do it in the form builder, or you can just move it and check it off and hit edit. You can also switch to, this is more of a developer-centric mode, but you can go to a source mode and look at the YAML source behind the form. And what I'm doing is doing this in a text editing mode, where I can take your company, move it over here, change company to be your company. I can even copy. And I'm altering the properties of the text field I just created. I'm going to hit save. And go over here. And instead of doing the View tab, I'm going to go to the Test tab. And now what we've done is we're in a automatically filled out with dummy text that you can quickly submit the form. And we're going to go and collect some data. I'm going to hit send. This displays a confirmation message. I'm going to do one little thing. That. Click back, and now let's review that result. Here's the record that just came in. We can click through, take a peek at it. You can even download it as a PDF. I'm going to go back up. We've reviewed it. Now we want to get it out. That's one way to download. You can download a single record as a PDF. Or if we go over to the Results tab, you can go to the Download section. And this gives you options where you can download all your results as PDF documents. What I'm going to do is generate an HTML table, which can be opened in Excel, but I'm not going to do that here, just so we can look at the data. And this is an example of what you'd see in Excel or Google Sheets when you pull the data down. That's pretty much a front-to-back demo of the Webform module, and if we go back to the slides, it's those steps. We're building the form, we're collecting data, and then we're distributing it. We did a very simple distribution where we just pulled it as a CSV. But to kind of start getting into this topic of Webforms for designers, as I worked on this deck, kind of came up with this concept or this theme that I started to explore. And I didn't go too into it, but forms are conversations, or that's how I'm starting to see it when I'm working on the user experience behind a form, because good forms ask the right questions which collect the best answers. It's an interaction. That's what conversations are. And I think with the advent and importance of conversational interfaces, it's a good approach to start thinking about your forms. And I actually feel like this might lead to the next generation of form builders, where you're asking these questions. When someone comes to a form, who are you? What brought you here? How can we help you? What information can you give us? And I mean, if you really look at it in the context of electrics, so I work for a hospital and we do appointment forms, so I'm kind of using that as this scenario where someone would say, Alexa, I would like to schedule a doctor's appointment, and Alexa would respond by looking at this form and saying, oh, is the appointment for you or someone else? For example, a parent scheduling an appointment for a child. And that's just the tip of the iceberg here. And I'm not going much further on this, and I'll use this as a theme as we start talking about really, Webforms for designers. But I came up with this slide because I thought it was interesting when you think about conversations and related to a form. There's productive conversations where you're listening to someone, you're responding, and you're collecting information, which is what we want from a form. But then there's also good conversation where there's an experience. It's a personal, thoughtful, empathetic. The tone of the form, the presentation of it, makes someone feel good about interacting with your organization. And this starts getting into it where conversations lead to experiences. And this brings us to user experience. And with the user experience around forms, I've kind of broke it down to 3 things: visual design, information design, and interactive design. I've simplified these approaches as, visual design, building attractive forms. I know visual design is more than that. Information design is creating understandable forms. And interactive design is making usable forms, making the interactions better as someone goes through it. And with understanding the user's experience when they're filling out a form, you've got to ask, who are they? What is their skill level? How much patience do they have when they're filling out a form? Why are they filling out this form? Why are they here in the first place? And even where are they filling out this form? That's a great example of desktop versus mobile. But to move into visual design, going back to conversation, visual design sets the tone of the conversation. How do we want users to feel when they discover, fill out, and complete a form? It starts the conversation. Visual design is the first impression, period. They get to a form, how it looks matters a lot. That is the first thing they're going to digest. And it makes it pleasing to view the information. Is it readable? If they can't read the information, they're going to be immediately frustrated. Visual design definitely establishes an organization's brand. And I added this, ensures that forms are accessible. I feel like visual designers are the gatekeepers of accessibility. If it fails there, no one's going to care. If the fonts aren't readable or don't have the right color contrast, no one else on the team is going to follow along and make the forms more accessible. And to get there, it's important to create a style guide on your forms for the visual designers. This is an example of the default style guide that comes with the Webform module. It's in the Webform examples module, and it just shows you every single element that's available. And you can go in and test it, make sure it works. You can customize this to include all the elements that you're using or tweaking. I really do think the style guides help with font style, sizes, color. You can also run it through accessibility tools. And yeah, you can use the style guide to set up your expectations. We're actually, I work with MSK and they're doing a design system. And they're doing a major overhaul of all their underlying templates. And we're using this style guide to verify things are still working as expected. It's one place to go and be like, here's every form element we're using. And then also in the Webform examples module, you can also just build simple example web forms for individual elements. So, for example, in the Webform examples module, there's one form that's just dedicated to input masks and shows you every variation of an input mask available in the Webform module. That just means when someone starts filling out phone numbers, it gives them little hints as they're typing. And yeah, you have to explore the elements and inputs available to you. I pulled some of the big ones out where you got simple text ones, but then you have your options, get into buttons, cute kittens, and a signature element. And I want to kind of step back and just give you some definitions of what I mean when I say elements. And an element is just, and this is a Drupalism, like people skip this sometimes, but it's anything that's displayed on a form. Really anything displayed on a page you can consider an element. And in Webform, an input is an element that just collects a value. Composites are a group of inputs working together to collect a group of values. An address is a composite element where you're collecting multiple data points. Containers is just an element that holds sub-elements. So you might see a details widget, a field set, or even a simple div that just has a bunch of elements listed below it. And containers are extended in the Webform module because it supports multi-step forms, so you have pages. And it's just a container that's displayed as a page. When you get to inputs, and when you're in the UI and navigating around, you'll see this categorization. There's simple text inputs, options, which is just select menus and checkboxes, and then file uploads are kind of broken down where you can have different types of file uploads. And I categorize a lot of other things as widgets, which are just kind of little advanced little elements like rating, signature, HTML5, stuff with phone and email. And then finally, there is full support for entity references for site builders. That's where you can have a drop-down that lists out nodes on your site or users on your site. It references other content or information on your website. And with the grouping, with the containers, these are just some visual examples where you have the details, which is a collapsible element, field sets. These are just horizontal rules, which just break up your form visually. And then this is just an example of Flexbox, where you're able to lay out your elements side by side. And I don't even need to describe any of these because I just walked you through them. Keep going. Now with every element, you can inject custom classes, styles, and attributes. This is where you get fine control, grain control of your visual design of the form. You can tweak any little aspect. When it's the wrapper, that's the entire container around an element, and then an element would be like the text box, tweaking that look and feel. And yeah, classes, you can specify reusable classes. So a designer can say, I want certain types of form elements to be big, and your site builders can go in and select that class, and it'll make your elements big. The style attribute is really if you're tweaking layout. If you need to adjust a margin of something in a form, you can just go and do it right there. And attributes, I use them mostly for tracking codes. That's where you're adding direct HTML attributes into your inputs. So you might put a data attribute so that Google will pick it up. What I want to demo is just the layout, the Flexbox, and styling. And we're going to stick to, let me put this guy down. I apologize. There we go. This form, this demo contact form that we've set, comes with it. I want to just do a Flexbox layout where you put your name and your company side by side. So you'd go in and you say add layout, and it's called Flexbox. So Flexbox, we're in a design conference, so it's a CSS3 standard for laying things out. I'm going to go up here. And you're just nesting these two elements underneath it, and we'll put them side by side. I have you. They're right here. Now if I want to enhance it, maybe even call this out a little bit more, we can dive into some of the custom attributes. So in the Flexbox, I could go over to advanced, and this is a container, and we could say, well, make it look like a message, which would be like this would, status would make it green. I'll just show you a couple of these really quick. Puts a green box around it. This is where the designers have to start. I'm not a designer, I'm a programmer. You guys start thinking creatively on how you'd want to enhance these elements. And if we go over here, we can go in and say, well, let's not do it that way. Let's take this out. And I'll just style it with HTML. Just simple CSS where you're going to say border, 5 pixels, black, solid, padding, 10 pixels. And you know what, I'm going to add a little, just add the horizontal rule. And you have control over these HR rules where you can go in. And this is where these custom classes are. You can control all of this from the admin configuration. I'm just going to make it solid, make it medium. Now it gets inserted at the bottom. I'm going to put it right below. Not pretty, but it starts to show you all the controls that you can do. And keep going. Yeah, the big takeaway here is you got to explore and experiment and see what's possible and iterate through it. And moving on to information design. So information design establishes the topic of the conversation. It's, what are the questions we need to ask the user and how should they be answered? And good information design just makes it easy for them to understand the information. It sets the expectation of what you're asking them. When they come to the form, can they understand all the pieces of data they need to get to? On very long forms, it helps when they can just scan it and be like, yes, I know all this information. And along the way, you want to provide explanations to each question. And this is showing you the kitchen sink of every possible way to kind of ask a question. This is the most standard thing here where it's just a title. This is a tooltip, which will just pop open. Placeholder text to kind of guide them through. There's a description, and then there's a little slide out more. I want to emphasize, I do not recommend ever doing all of these at once. I enjoyed setting it up and pointing it out. And there's really, you have to think about the design of your forms, and I tried to break these up and think of it like placeholders provide a little guidance. They give people a little nudge in the right direction. Instead of just saying phone number, you might show the format of the phone number you expect. Descriptions, which is just this piece of text below the input or above it, that is the easiest way to go in most cases. You provide a little extra information. The more link, which slides out, is when you have a lot of information. I actually just used it on this form where they needed a giant page of extra information for certain users just starting out. So you don't want to cram the form up with all that information, so you can click more and get this huge slide out with like graphics on exactly how people should fill out the question. And help, and this is a full contradiction to the Webform UI, use it cautiously because it's good for providing information in tight spaces, but if someone's coming to a form for the first time, making them click through these help bubbles is not really a great UX. I'm contradicting myself because I rely on them a lot in the Webform module because there's a different use case there. The use case I run into is people are coming to the same form over and over and over again, so I want it to be as clean as possible, and if they have a question, they can click a tooltip and get a little help along the way. And if I was showing all that descriptive information, the forms would get very cluttered. And this is a very important accessibility thing that everyone repeats over and again. Placeholders should not replace labels. Generally, you want to have your labels on your form. Placeholders are just helpful. And yes, use these cautiously. And a kind of unique feature of the Webform module is you can add inline messages. I use these a lot. Within the form, as someone's filling them out, you can give them little hints, warnings. And these messages provide explanations. They can prevent unexpected errors. If someone fills something out, you can use conditional logic to say, you might have a problem filling out this form, or please provide some extra information as you fill it out. And these messages are closable. So sometimes I will just have a little warning message for the first time someone's coming to a form, that they'll just close it, never see it again, but it's like, by the way, you need to do this task before, be aware of something, or it's just, you're talking, I like messages because it talks directly to the user, calls it out. And now getting to composite elements, which I hinted out before, is they allow you to organize a lot of complex information. From an information design perspective, especially for large organizations, it's worth thinking these things out. The Webform module ships with kind of standard ones, like an address, contact field, a name. But you can build your own custom composites and be like, this is a common data set we need to collect. This is the type, for a hospital, we might want to have a patient composite element that we could just reuse on multiple forms. And yeah, it just standardizes the collection of data, and they're just reusable. So you kind of define the specification for this data, and then once your developers build out the composite, that's it. And going back to more traditional stuff is, prevent form errors using validation. And the Webform module ships with the traditional, required checkbox, make something required or not. You can also display custom messages with that error, and sometimes that's useful. That's a lot of work sometimes on forms to write out custom required messages, but sometimes saying this element is required is not enough for someone. Saying why can make a difference. There's also patterns. I don't want to lose you. Patterns are awesome. I mean, if you need, you could I use patterns sometimes to limit the email address people can enter in, and just say you can only enter in our domain for the organization. And counters are also really useful for large text fields. Some tips. I think this one is so, I have to bring it up sometimes just to remind people, put required elements before optional. And I even go as far to say you should put required inputs in a grouping before optional. Like optional should just be, like if you're asking for contact information, say, here's the required contact information, group it together, and then you can say additional information. Makes it a lot easier for someone to fill out a form. If they look at a section and be like, nothing here is required, I can just keep going, I don't need to. Establish patterns for your desired values when you're talking about information on how do you want phone numbers to be collected across the organization. This is something very few organizations I see do, like where they set up a guide and say, we want it with dashes, period. And it can make a difference. And conditional logic is a great way to simplify your forms. You can hide and show inputs based on people's, they check a box. I use it for the appointment forms. I am a patient, therefore we say, give us your information. I am a caregiver, we have to say, give us the patient information and the personal contact information. And I'm going to demo composites because I kind of want to work toward a more interesting example. So we're going to tweak this form. I'm going to go in, go to results. I'm going to purge this result so I can actually, you know what, do it differently. I'm going to take out this contact information that we manually put in. I'm going to take out this HR. And we're going to add contact element. And contact. And you can control, with the contact element, you're seeing all the settings where you have name, company, email. I'm not going to collect email because I'm going to keep this email address that we already have just for simplicity. We can get all this information. I'm not going to make things required. But you can see you can actually control all those labels within this composite. If you're doing it from the developers building for you, they don't have to give out all these options, but I'm going to keep going. Hit save. Go in. And you see that you get this rich, oh, I did a little mistake where I put it at the bottom. Move it up. And it just automatically lays it out. And there's even, just to show you, because I brought up Flexbox before, right down here, a little layout with Flexbox. And it'll save a little space. Come back to that in a minute. This slide is out of place. I'm not going to spend any time talking about it, but we're going through a lot of little nuances and details and tweaking things. And it's very important when you're building your forms to think about metrics. How are you going to test these things? As you make changes and say, well, let me use a contact element. Let me lay it out in 2 columns. Having some testing system in place, I personally like A/B testing. That's where you have 2 variations of a form and you test them on users. You just get a stat. Which one is more successful? Which approach has a higher completion rate? As I'm getting into more advanced interactive stuff, this is going to come up because you start experimenting, you want to know it's successful. So with interactive design, it defines the process of the conversation, how you're engaging the user filling out the form. How are we going to ask and respond to questions and answers? And good interactive design makes it easy for people to enter information. It makes it intuitive, and I really think all forms should respond to user interaction. That's why conditional logic exists. You want to ask them the right question early on and then get the right information and tweak the form. And you want to prevent errors. I think that's a key thing to think about is you want people, when they submit the form it goes through, they don't get errors because they understand how things are working. If something's required, it's clear. And there's a lot of ways to improve the user experience by adjusting the form's behaviors. And this is a rich set of checkboxes, and I'll recommend a bunch of them, but it's worth looking at all of them and thinking about them. The one that I'll call out that I probably do this one's great. If you have a form that's massive, this is just a checkbox that does, we all have seen it, like when we're in a Google Doc or Gmail where you accidentally exit and says, are you sure you want to lose all this information right now? I turn this on any form with more than like 10 or 20 inputs. Like once you hit like 20 inputs and you know the user might accidentally click back and lose their data, it makes a huge difference. I have a list of some. This is an interesting one that's actually below the fold. It's somewhere down here in these checkboxes. But you can pre-populate inputs by using query string parameters. This is huge. So if you have a form and someone's going to it, I go back to my appointment example. If someone's clicking, I would like to request an appointment at a hospital from a pediatric section of the site, you can pass a query string parameter that says, well, they're coming from pediatrics, so pre-fill out certain elements. If you know that information, you can just get it in there. And I brought up the warning users about unsafe changes. You can prevent duplicate submissions so that you can have the submit button only work when they click it once. Drupal has this ongoing ticket about displaying a required indicator, because right now we just display a little red asterisk next to our inputs, and for accessibility, you shouldn't make people think. You should just say what things are, and it's just displays a little red asterisk that says indicates required element. Auto-focusing the first element, very useful if someone's going to a form and filling it out over and over again. If you're building a form where someone keeps coming in, it just means that it starts on the first input, they can just start typing. Conditional logic, responding to their interaction. So you can go in and say whether something's required. If someone entered an email address, you can decide, okay, I want to require this next element or not. And some tips with conditional logic. If you're building really complex forms, be very aware of this, that you can apply it to containers. So you can have a whole section that has one condition. If someone says A, you show a whole bunch of different inputs and require them. This is a very tricky, nuanced pattern. Hidden elements can trigger conditions. How does that work? You could have a field type of user, and that could be pre-populated using a query string parameter, and you can then have that query string parameter change the form dynamically. And the user doesn't even know what's happening. They just come to the form and it's been laid out a certain way. And it's a little tip here where you can use the pattern trigger. There's a pattern trigger that you can use for multiple values. So now we're going to use some of the advanced inputs. Just help with interaction. This is just setting expectations using these advanced inputs where this is an example of an input mask, the counter. I really like this international telephone widget. So it's the HTML5 telephone element, but it gives them the formatting and guidance and just makes it a little easier to get the right phone number. Combined with server-side validation, you can guarantee these numbers work. And this is just a standard select to, and this is just a problem with HTML. Like select elements with multiple values, just the UX is not great. And it provides a little tagging widget. And some tips and tricks for advanced elements, yeah, they definitely improve user experience. I had that example of the cute kittens that you can do image selection. Certain sites, it's huge to be able to do that. If you're selling something, you want to show the products or the different colors or the textiles. They also, advanced elements just provide better visual cues. So having a star rating element versus entering a number from 1 to 5 makes it a little easier. And you can ensure better data by using richer elements. And there's a thing you got to always watch out for. I want to just point out, all of these have some accessibility issues. This one has a very weird accessibility issue where screen readers will read the underscores out loud. Kind of throws people off. It's a trade-off. I think people on screen readers are kind of used to this goofiness happening, and they kind of just know how to bypass it. So right now, in this day and age, we have Webform supports select to, chosen. You have to pick one. Chosen and choices. These are ways to enhance select menus. None of them are 100% accessible. They all have accessibility issues. Usually it's just they're not telling people how it's working or what they're selecting, and they need a little help getting there. So moving toward the end, you can do some really advanced stuff with the Webform module, and you should really experiment with how you're going to present forms to a user. And this is an example of a multi-step form being opened in a modal dialog. And I'm going to access. So the idea of both of these is, you can reduce information overload. I use modals a lot in the demo for an event registration system, because there's a demo of an event registration system. So someone goes to an event and you want to let them register. It's a little awkward to have this registration form sitting at the bottom of every event. So instead there's a little button and you click it and a modal dialog opens up and lets them register right then and there. They hit save, it closes, and they can keep going on with their user experience. And wizards, break up the information, and they also support save and resume so people don't lose the data as they're going back and forth. And you definitely, enabling AJAX on your forms just improves the responsiveness, the user experience. It doesn't reload the entire page. It makes users feel a little more comfortable as they click through it. And I'm going to do a rich demo of this, and it's a little configuration stuff. Everything I'm going to show you, by the way, this is not a presentation where I'm trying to walk through every setting in the Webform module. And there's some things that, you'd be like, how did he do that? There's actually, if you look up Webform modal dialogues, there's a screencast about Webform modal dialogues. There's an example of a Webform wizard. I'm trying to do this demo to kind of inspire you to be like, you can do anything you want. That's really the takeaway before I even start showing this and I lose you. You have to just realize that you can think of any user experience you want to do and get your site builders, and I think that's part of it from a design, if you're a designer, is pushing your site builders to accomplish these things. So for this demo, there's a little nuance with modal dialogues, and this for site builders, they'll appreciate it. For designers, they'll think, why do I have to do this? You have to go up into the configuration of the Webform module and enable modal dialogues site-wide, because it's a little inappropriate for the Webform module. I'm going to collapse this so we don't have to look at all this stuff. To be installed and then drop the modal dialogue library on every single page of your site. You have to make a deliberate decision that you want modals across every page. So you enable your site-wide modals. By the way, these are just presets on the widths of your modals. And it's all covered in the screencast, so I'm not going to spend too much on it, but I'm saying enable it. And it drops. Yep, and it just gives you a little help where if you want to insert modal dialogues in your text format, you have to configure it. But for this demo, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add a link. So I've turned it on. I'm going to stick to the contact form. So we've gone globally and said turn it on, but now let's go back to the form. What I want to do here is a couple of things. I'm going to make this a multi-step form just to show you how simple it is. I'm going and just clicking Add Page. Contact information. I'm adding a single page. And I'm going to add another page. And message. And I need to make this a different name. So I've added 2 pages. I'm going to move the contact element here. It will leave email sitting there. I'll put the message. So now we have a multi-step form. Click back. Now we're going to turn on Ajax. So I want to show you. I personally also think you should turn on Ajax for most of your forms. It's not appropriate for Webform modules to make that decision across the board, but you can go in here. And you can actually control how the progress type works. So I'm going to do a full screen message. You could even do I'll do a slide. Because it's the Bardic theme and there's some margin issues, you'll see it jump a little bit. You can control the speed, but let's leave it at the default. Let's test this. Boom. And you can see it's a lot cleaner. So let's go over here. And we'll go back. I'm going to take the slide out because it's doing a little too much there. Okay. Okay, so I want to pause, be like, we got a form, it's multi-step, it's a contact form. Now, how do we get this into a modal dialogue? Automatically, when you go down here, I'm going to collapse this so we can go right to the modal stuff. This gives you a little demo how to test the modal dialogue. So I can go in and say, well, I want to do a normal modal. I can click the button. This is opening up in the 7th theme. This is not our front-end site, but it gives us a starting point. And it gives you this HTML snippet, which if your text formats, your body, where your HTML editor is, supports those custom classes, you can drop this in. That's not actually the UX I want to go after, but what I want to do is I'm going to grab, hopefully everyone's okay with CSS, I'm going to grab the classes, and I have a little tool installed. So it's an add-on module. It's, I think, the menu links attributes module, which allows you to add custom attributes to your menu links. And what we're going to do is go over to the user menu, and I think I want to give you a little context of what we're after here. This is the user menu. And if I was in incognito, you wouldn't even see, the unmasquerade or my account. I just want to add a contact link to it. And hit add link, contact, and I do have the URL member, form, contact. And this is what that module does. It just makes it possible for you to inject a little class in there. Now if we go over to here, you get this little thing, and it opens up the modal dialog. I have nothing required here. Oh, it filled it out, so. And we can even go and hit send message and, it redirects and sends it. What I like about this user experience, going all the way back to conversations, is if someone's clicking a link to say, I want to contact you, this is immediate. This is like, okay, give us your information. We're not going to redirect you to a new page and you have to kind of come back here. Just tell us what you think. And makes it a little easier. It's faster. They're more likely to complete this form. Going all the way back to user acceptance testing, this is not something I've tested. This is just a theory. It'd be worth testing both approaches to see if you get a higher completion rate. Yeah, and I mean, I just showed you the most complex thing I could think of in the Webform module, and I'm coming back to try to keep it simple. Always think about simplicity. And really, the goal is, in the Webform module, it's a really complex, it's not complex, there's a lot of features, a lot of possibilities. The goal is to make it easy and simple for your users to complete the task at hand. And I'm trying to provide you the tools to make those decisions and make the best ones. And kind of wrapping up, wow, I think I gave you guys a lot of time back. Huh, good. So just some information about me. You can connect with me on my blog, Drupal.org, Twitter. Yeah, we didn't, like, you guys can definitely ask questions about if you use the Webform module and you have some specific question or challenge you need addressed, I got no problem demoing that. But there's a lot of documentation. There are screencasts of almost every feature available. Everything I just showed you, there's a screencast. And I think that helps because you can get the information. And these two, I think it's important. This is giving everyone the inside information. If you have a general question, use Drupal Answers. People will respond. I'm on there too. And usually can get help if you need general support. And if you find a bug or issue, just file it. And usually that'll get addressed pretty quickly. And I'm just doing a light pitch for the Webform module's Open Collective. And it just allows, open source projects to transparently collect and distribute funds. This is something that's shifting in the Drupal community. This is a thing that's known. Like on project pages, we're now going to start having a sponsorship link so people can help support different projects. Doesn't have to be Open Collective on these project page links. It could be anything. And, why should you support the Webform module? Well, that logo that I'll show at the end, the black logo, was paid for by the Open Collective funds. I'm experimenting. We haven't done a security release, but I would like to provide people with little thanks for filing security issues, just to encourage them. I might use some of the funds to offset travel costs. Accessibility is really important in this day and age. That's why I like the concept that forms are conversations, because accessibility kind of lends itself to it. If you can't talk to someone, that's a big problem. And accessibility becomes a roadblocker to those conversations. And some people can't interact with your site. And I'm just experimenting with maybe providing better support options. And you can go to the Webform modules Open Collective page. Look at that link go out. I added that this morning, so I can see. And yep, thanks. That's Ralph. He's 15. And with me. Oh, and there's the logo. Thank you. You guys. Any questions? It doesn't have to be about design. It could be about Webforms.
Thanks for all the work you've done on this. I wanted to know, you talked about a conversation. I wonder if you're able to link different forms to users so you can continue to have that conversation with them and keep that data associated with the user.
Yeah, Webforms, when you do a submission, there's a lot of tracking going on. There's two types of tracking that are happening. There's the user who's submitting the form, and it keeps track of that heavily. They have to be authenticated. It's important. And what's kind of crazy is even anonymous users in their browser, it tracks them and will convert. There's a feature you can track them, and when they log in, it will convert those anonymous submissions like a shopping cart and bring it over to their account. You can also, just a little note about tracking, is you can track where the form's being submitted from, and that's how event registration systems are created. With GDPR, if you have I think it's on automatically now that users can go to their user profile and see all their submissions. And then there's an admin view that you can go and filter that and tweak it and create kind of like a dashboard. It gives them like a dashboard of all their event registrations. It's all based on permissions. It's basic.
You said GDPR?
It's a European. What does it stand for? It's the European Standard for Privacy. So basically, they had all these.
Something.
What?
General data
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tied to the idea that users need to be able to see their information, update their information, and delete their information. And that's why like the tab was added to make it really clear. But you have to turn on all the permissions.
Yep.
And it's kind of most organizations. The rule of deleting information, they don't really have to be able to delete the information. They have to be able to tell you to delete the information. You do it within a time frame. Any other questions?
Wait, do you have to have your form be multi-step to be modal?
No, not at all. Yeah, it can be one-off thing. And it's a little, you can decide on it. There's you can change how modals work in terms of confirmation. Like when someone hits submit, it could open up a new modal, it could close, it could redirect. You kind of can control everything. You are tied to the jQuery UI modal dialog. That's a limitation with modals. But I like the UX on it. And the accessibility is fine. They've done enough where screen readers don't lose track of the modal. They'll, when you hit submit, it closes, and people use it on their own. Any other? Cool. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the conference.